questions across, and we believe our panel of experts from Brazil, from Harvard at USA, and those of us professionals here in the Institute of African Studies to be here to answer your question. It is nice having you. We are still discussing the issue of on local design, local planning, and local design and planning philosophy. And we're going to bring, for the next 10 minutes, to share his experience with us. That is the Associate Professor, Dr. Ayo Yusuf, and he's from Institute of African and Diaspora Studies. And he will be here as Head of Research. Dr. Yusuf, please.
Good afternoon, scholars. I am primarily a linguist and working on African languages, specifically the Yoruba language. So I'll be speaking from my experience in Yoruba culture. It's the kind of research I've done on Yoruba culture in respect of what the umpire calls architecture. And then I want to start by saying that architecture, in the sense as we conceive it today, is not, it does not have an equivalent in Yoruba culture. Architecture, if it relates to design of buildings and of structures, is in the mind of the Yoruba person. It's in the mind, perhaps because of the issue of non-literacy, not illiteracy, non-literacy. So the design that you have is always denominated by, that is, if they are design, you want to put on a building, depends on the climate, the nature of that person, the position of the person in the society, and what's available in the environment. And so, when you look at Yoruba civilization, building started by, through putting up what we call bere, but which are well equivalent raffia. They are put together to build houses, because the Yoruba people are situated in the tropics. And advancement came when there was a combination of the bere and clay, and later just clay, or clay reinforced with bamboo. A species of the Yoruba called Ilaje, because they live on water, build their houses with bamboo. We still have them around now. If you go to Makoko in Lagos, you still see the bamboo houses. If you go to Ilaje area, generally you will see bamboo houses on top of water. They build their houses there, and the Eguns also build houses with raffia. So what makes for building? A builder in the Yoruba sense is an architect, a quantity surveyor, is a structural engineer, is everything. All these professions are built in one person. And it is not unusual for building. The person you call an agbede in Yoruba, a blacksmith, is a seismologist, is a mineralogist, is a physicist, is a smetrist, is an artist. All of these are blended in one person. As a result of specializations, we now have a situation where the architect designs, and then the structural engineer puts in place structures that will ensure that the architect's design is realizable. Such did not exist among the Yoruba in terms of building. And so, if we are now considering theories, let me start by saying that architecture as it is now is a science, it's an art. It's also a social science, because the architect must know the person he wants to build for. If I am a farmer, for instance, he should know that I will have a vegetable garden, a very big one. But the structure among the Yoruba, because of when they say architecture, I think there's something like culture inside it as well. You have a big space that is called car, translatable to courtyard. That space is used sometimes for meetings among elders, and the evenings for the elder that is telling folktales to children. And that's one way, one important method of transmitting morals, ethical values to our children. So that car was always there. What we have now, all the structures we have around now are imported. And to me, they are not good for the Yoruba space. This is a tropical area. We build houses that generate a lot of heat. We need air conditioners. We build high rises. We build also. We don't take into consideration the nature of the people, the nature of the environment any longer. And I guess that education should be able to look inward and then apply modern sciences to be able to realize what we had, improve on it, and ensure that we are able to live in buildings that are suitable for our environment. So I want to propose a kind of ancestors descendants interface. Ancestors descendants interface. What do I mean by this? Reflexibility, to reflect upon what we have, the situation on ground, the enabling environment. Then we come now with modern technology to now have clay. The clay we were using was being blended by those who know the art. The scientists can now let us know the content of the clay and then maybe have burnt clays, which I think I can see some researchers coming from South Africa in that instance. Then we can still have our pillars and still build our high rises while we maintain what will be useful to us, what will make us live without necessarily bringing in modern technology like ACs and all of that into our houses. Right now, in some buildings, people have recreational areas that are still built with bere or raffia within the houses, just a reflection of those who love African culture still do it. So we can look at it from that perspective. For me, engineering is the use of scientific methods to make things better. So we have universities of technology, many of them around here, faculties of engineering all over the place. I've not been seeing a situation where palm oil production, the way we knew it, has been heavily improved upon. Our palm wine, there are so many things here that we really need to apply our knowledge. And that is one area where China has been excelling, trying to have an interface between modern technology, modern scientific methods, and what they had. COVID has exposed us. There are a lot of things, herbs, medicines that we have. We thought we were never doing surgery in Africa until I saw something on my WhatsApp when brain was opened up and there was a surgery, cancer was removed and closed again, perhaps not as neatly as it is done now. If we have been in a position as we are now to apply modern methods to improve on all of this, I believe that we will not be looking up all of the time for solutions from the West. We are still looking for solutions from the West now in respect of COVID, whereas we have solutions still with us that we can package and then even showcase to the world. We cannot go to the market all the time wanting to buy. We must have something to sell, and we have a lot to sell. We have a lot to sell. It's just that somehow, I don't know whether it's colonialism, but I will not blame colonialism any longer by now. Because so many other countries who are colonized like African nations have come out of it. They have removed the garment and they are now on their own, using their languages, using their cultures, but borrowing, using modern methods to better what they have. So in respect of building, in respect of architecture, what we now know as architecture, I think we have to look inward.
Yeah.
Yes, look inward.
Yeah.
See what we have been doing. See why my grandmother's house had a window of about 1 foot square. one square, and we were not feeling any heat inside those rooms then. I slept. I mean, as a young boy, I lived with my grandmother. We were not feeling any heat. Why is it that when we have power outage, when we have a little problem, all of us will be sweating and we will have no place to hide?
Well, that's great. It's nice hearing Dr. Ayo Yusuf telling us that we got to a point in which there must be some level of hybridization. In other words, we see the modern technology hybridized into what we believe in to come up with a system of building. That is great. But again, Dr. Kazim Payani, I know you are a philosopher. I know you have a department of philosophy, and we'll get back to the end. I'll be able to come with the issue of philosophy. But meanwhile, I want to bring in an urban anthropologist, Moses. I will call him Efunwale. He'll be joining us right now. Moses, you've heard what Dr. Ayo Yusuf said just now. From anthropological perspective, urban anthropology, what is your take on this? And that is what we want to hear right now. I'm talking about Dr. Moses, who's coming in from Harvard right now. Originally, he flew in from Brazil to Harvard. Will be joining us to share his experience with us. Dr. Moses, please. Efunwale Moses. While we are waiting for Moses to come on board, we are still waiting for him. It would be nice for us to think about what Dr. Ayo Yusuf have just said with the issue of that we've got to a point in which we have to look inward, not only material, but as much as the way we construct. Give an example: living in his grandmother's room, though it's only a foot square, yet it is determined. I mean, it's terminally comfortable. And while we are waiting for Dr. Moses from Harvard, we will continue right now. Moses. Okay. Now, while we are waiting for him, we will now bring in Dr. Kasim Payani. Dr. Payani is a philosopher and is a thinker, and he has he runs through those ideas. We want to hear his opinion. What do you think, and what philosophy should drive what Dr. Ayo Yusuf just said just now? We want to hear from him. Dr. Payani, please, if you are with us now, you can just come on board.
Okay. I want to thank the organizer and other panelists for this wonderful opportunity to be here. I think local designs have been systematically underplayed in efforts towards urbanism and sustainable cities in many parts of African states. And in correcting this shortcoming, there is an increasing call for having local design and planning philosophy in the architectural industry in Nigeria and Africa at large. But the question is, what indigenous philosophical models have been projected in the literature? And is such a philosophy actually reflexive of indigenous architecture in African societies or not? I'm going to answer this question, and I think one profound example of developing a local design and planning philosophy is that one offered by Professor Tuji Adejumo's template that he called Henry de Logan Cosmogram. Generally, when we talk about a cosmogram, it's a geometric representation of a people's cosmology. While focusing on the Yoruba example, Professor Adejumo interestingly came up with a design cosmogram that avoids religious and supernatural elements while emphasizing 4 and 16 design numerology, geometric planning, signs, colors, and symbols that we can usefully adapt in post-colonial architectural designs and beyond. He believes these efforts is one in the direction of plurivalism, which should be promoted rather than the suspicious cosmopolitan localism currently underpinning African architectural space. I am convinced by the urgency of having local design and planning philosophy. Commendably, pioneering is the constructive effort of Professor Adejumo. However, I am skeptical about its cogency as the most reliable route to having an indigenous architectural philosophy to inform policies and vocation. While he has approached the Yoruba local design and planning philosophy strictly from the ambience of cosmology, I will be offering a complementary understanding of the subject matter through a normative lens. My concern about his approach is with the segregation of the religious outlook from the Yoruba cosmological worldview in his own cosmogram. While I'm not here to pursue the criticism here, I shall be focusing on the Yoruba people as well. And I'll seek to discover, one, the traditional architectural pattern of the Yoruba, and after a brief description of such architectural pattern, I shall try to tease out the normative values underpinning such traditional architecture, which are often dismissed as inconsequential in contemporary urbanization efforts. However, traditional values are invaluable in informing an integrative philosophy of contemporary architectural designs. I shall conclude that in decolonizing architecture and integrating traditional with modern architectural designs, which Dr. Yusuf also mentioned, values grounding indigenous designs and planning ought to be taken seriously at the pedagogical level, at the policy level, and vocational architectural levels. So when we talk about Yoruba traditional architecture, for me, I think it is simply more of communal in conception. Though architecture in itself was hardly a vocation in pre-colonial Yoruba societies, however, that is not to deny the implicit planning in house designs. For the Yoruba people, architecture is inspired by their culture of honoring families, communal relationships, and as such, they try to prize courtyard design in the architecture. There is this emphasis on relationship of people to each other, to ancestors, to kin. And while designing their houses or buildings, they try to accommodate extended family, and you have the house more of regular open plan compound with different rooms open to one to the other. So they have their spaces planned with trees in mind. So for the traditional Yoruba society, we can also say that they have a model of social hierarchy, whereby the King's Palace is at the center. And Professor Adejumo also noted that in his cosmogram, that you have the King's Palace at the center, the chiefs around him, they have theirs quite closely related to where he stays. One common feature in traditional architecture among the Yoruba is that you have traditional language, the design, the arts, the natural heritage, they are interwoven in Yoruba architecture. Though the root of the Yoruba people is the root of their architecture is fast disappearing, giving way to modern European, American, Caribbean architectural models. One implication of such development is what we can rightly call alienation of cultural identity in architecture. So at this point, I will try to take us through to the values in traditional Yoruba architecture. I'm not interested in the cosmological foundation, which Professor Adejumo has extensively explored. As opposed to modern design and planning practices that are historically founded upon systems of patriarchy, capitalism, colonialism, traditional Yoruba architecture is often grounded on values such as integration. And when we say integration, the design of built environment among the Yoruba is not simply about physical spaces. Rather, it's an expression and extension of identity. Physical surroundings for them are not separated as such from their thinking about ancestors and some other events. Another value has to do with collaboration and cohesion. Designs are expression of hospitality, responsibility, spirituality. Right. And another key component of the architectural design is visibility. They make use of symbols. Symbols are quite typical of the expressions they give to their unique cultural context. There is also value of membership, creation of places to reflect identity, more of empathy. They design to have something of reconciliation in mind. Take, for instance, trees. Trees for them offers warmth.
Dr. Fayemi, what you are saying is fantastic. But again, when you look at the fact that there is a sociological difference now, okay, we are basically more of the nuclear family is coming in as against the extended family. Question then is, those values must be treated one way or the other. We'll come back to you. Locally, we can get Dr. Moses from the University of Florida University at Bahia, there in Brazil, but he'll be speaking from US right now. We are going to ask from as an anthropologist, open anthropologist, how do we get the issue of realizing that there is a difference? I don't want to use good old things fall apart time that the center is falling apart. Extended family seems to be with me. Nuclear family seems to be coming aboard. There must be a way we transition here when we are talking about the values. Dr. Moses.
Ekasan Bobo Remi, Latin Nigeria.
Yeah.
Shedadani.
Alafia Moses.
Adupeo. Pele, I'm sorry for joining a bit late. I was looking for the link. I only had the link for June 2nd. So it took me a while to find the link for June 4th. I'm sorry. But I'd just like to say thank you very much to Professor Tunji. I think his reflections were on June 2nd were really interesting and important because we desperately need to think new ways moving forward with our design and urbanism in light of the post-colonial challenges. And this is what I think Professor Tunji is doing very well, is to think, you know, given the colonial past and what happened to countries like Nigeria and Brazil, and I put my own country, Brazil, as a colonial society. We were colonies to Portugal. How to move forward. And I'd just like to say that there is a growing group of people realizing that perhaps development and colonization and the mentality that colonizers left behind, that we should develop and grow, and they're copying their systems, copying the systems of the colonizers, that this scheme of things, that's not really working well. More and more people are realizing that when we look around us, the results of not just colonization, but the way that we ourselves post-colonies, the way that we are handling our societies and our cities and our spaces, that's not the best way, because we look around us and it's all environmental destruction, for example. Is that really the way we want to live? So more and more people are questioning that. And I think Professor Tunji is an important voice when it comes to it. I would just like to add to that, I'm an anthropologist and I'm not necessarily studying architecture, but I do study the relationship between Afro-Brazilian spaces, called in Brazil candomblé houses, terreiros, where Nigerian orishas are actually celebrated and cultivated due to the connection that Nigeria and Brazil, we both have through the slavery past. So we have a colonial connection, right? There was a triangulation between Europe. Oh, sorry, my earphone just fell. There was a triangulation between Europe, Africa, and Latin America and Brazil. So a lot of people traveled between Nigeria and Brazil, including the orishas. So, and where I come from, I teach in this university in Bahia, and Bahia, I don't know if you know, Salvador de Bahia is the second largest Black city. Well, actually, it's the largest Black city in the world outside of Africa, anywhere. So there are more African descendants in Nigeria than anywhere else in the world. And there we've been trying to understand, together with Gareth Doherty, who is going to speak today, how come that the largest green areas in the city are the Afro-Brazilian areas, are the areas where the orishas are still celebrated. I'm not going to talk much about that, but at the same time, we've been trying to understand the Oshun-Oshobo forest, the Oshun-Oshobo grove. And I've been traveling to Nigeria very often. And again, the question for us is, how come you travel all over Nigeria and you see a lot of environmental problems and environmental destruction, and you reach Oshobo and there is this beautiful, powerful forest in the middle of town with all that vitality and with all the environmental benefits that it offers, right? So I just want to recap and go back to Tunde's argument, because I think here we have, it's almost two ways forward, right? Professor Tunde talked about how we should somehow benefit from the religious knowledge, but not make it religious as such, right? That we somehow abstract from the religious side to obtain the philosophy. So that if we have the philosophy, we can design based on Yoruba philosophy, but we don't have to necessarily preach Yoruba religion. And I understand him, because I've been having this conversation about how is the Oshun-Oshobo forest possible with people that sometimes are not very keen on the Orisha aspect of the story. And with those people, what we anthropologists say is that, okay, we have this term in anthropology, we can bracket some things. So, you know, if you want to bracket that part of the gods or the Orisha, is Oshun this goddess or not, let's bracket that. So taking that apart, we all seem to agree that there is an environmental impact, that that forest is there because of Yoruba culture. And then people get more comfortable moving forward with the discussion when you put it in those terms. And I've seen Yoruba people doing that a lot. When it comes, for example, to festivals in different cities and towns, I often go to Ejibo for the Ogion festival. And it seems that a lot of people are not necessarily thinking of it as a religious event, but they go because of the city and the town and the king. And so that's bracketing the more religious aspect. And I think that's one way forward, but I would just like to propose another point of view for this discussion today, and that's all, and I'll conclude with that, which is what other forms of arguments. So if there is one cosmopolitanism, which Professor Tunde mentioned, which is based on Kant, the cosmopolitanism of being at home anywhere in the world. So this ability of breaking boundaries and one world for one people. So that's the, you know, one word for many people, actually, to accommodate difference within one world. There are other people thinking of cosmopolitanism in other terms, which is more in terms of a cosmos politics. So a politics that involves different cosmos. And those people are saying, look, if we really want to negotiate our differences and our problems, we'll not want to bracket anything, but we want to bring everything to the table. All forces to the table, all gods to the table, all religions to the discussion table. So these people are saying that maybe perhaps the best way forward would be to include all religions and all gods and all forces in our debates and our negotiations and in our politics in a way that we're not bracketing anything off. So they're saying, fine, if there is a Christian, you come with the God that, you know, your Christian God, and you come to the discussion recognizing that your God exists and it operates in certain ways, and you have certain values based on your gods. Now, I'm initiated to, I'm Omo Obatala Nimi, Obatala priest. I come to the discussion table with my Obatala values, and we try together to reach a consensus. Now, I would just say that when we think about these forces, you know, it's not just gods that they have power, but capital, money. That's a big drive for urbanization. So we would bring also people that, worship money to the table. There are capitalists that worship money. All they think about is money. And a lot of our urban development comes from interest based on capital. Yeah.
What he's saying is the fact that we cannot just push away the religious belief, because from the experience, the few of the open spaces are very prominent are the one that the people have prescribed using religious values. That we'll come back to FMOLE much later. We gave you why I'm bringing in Gary Duarte, who is an ethnographer as well as a landscape architect, to come let us know his view about the way forward if we must generate a local design and planning philosophy. What must we do? What do we draw? What do we add? How do we go about it? Dr. Gary Duarte, please, from Harvard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tunji. Thank you for inviting me. And again, I'm sorry that I was late. I couldn't find the right link either. But I wonder if I prepared some PowerPoint slides. I wonder if I could share my screen.
Sure.
It says that I need the host needs to enable.
Yeah, well, is that okay for us to enable you to share your slide?
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask, how many slides do you have?
About 10.
10? 10 for 10 minutes?
Oh, but I can just talk. I can just talk. That's easier.
When you get the slide later, we can get it back to the website for everybody to look at. Thank you. Just talk about it. Appreciate it.
Okay, sure. So thank you very much for inviting me. What I would like to talk about is the work of a new design lab that we've established at Harvard Graduate School of Design. It's called the Critical Landscapes Design Lab, and it's based on 2 questions. Now, I think the discussion that you're having, and I saw the video of Tuesday, is very relevant, particularly in light of contemporary design, where I think more and more people are becoming aware of the importance of knowledge from various parts of the world that are not necessarily a Western-centric logic. And the lab is based on 2 questions. And the first is, how can theoretical, educational, and design possibilities be expanded and diversified through working in societies where there is no formal landscape architecture discipline? Now I'm speaking from the point of view of a landscape architect. And secondly, which I think is even more important, is how can landscape architects work more sensitively outside of their own social contexts, with respect and with deference for others' values and ways of life. So I think there's a danger for landscape architects, which is mostly a Western European and North American discipline in many ways. And there's a danger that landscape architects can become agents of colonization, right? Because we're importing a Western model in societies that have a different understanding and a different practice of landscape. And to that end, we've been looking and we've been researching projects in different parts of the world, including as Moisés or FNLA just mentioned, Brazil, Afro-Brazilian religious spaces, and also, as you know, in Nigeria. But what I wanted to talk about today is an example of another project that I worked on and how that can contribute to theory. And I come from another post-colonial society. I come from Ireland. I come from the north of Ireland. I'm both Irish and British. I can be either. So one day I can be Irish, the next day I can be British, or I can be both on the same day. I have two passports because I come from this border. And I grew up in a small village, and the first project that I ever built as a landscape architect was in the village. So I designed the square, the marketplace of this village. I did it at university in Dublin. I had lots of advice from many famous landscape architects, including Geoffrey Jellicoe, who's a British landscape architect, and who I had discovered had been to my village, and I met with him. And he gave his approval, and no one thought this project would ever be built, but because of funding that came through the European Union, the project got built. And for me, it was a fascinating project, but it caused me to ask a very serious question, because as a landscape architect, who gives me the right to practice? Who gives me the right to design for them? And how can I achieve the same or a similar level of intimacy with the people I'm designing for in other projects? So I grew up in this village. I lived in the village. I designed for the village. And then when I went to move on to different villages, I realized I didn't have that knowledge that I had from my own village. And through that, I discovered the power of anthropology and the power of being able to learn from anthropologists who are really good at understanding topics and values and other people's ways of life. So one project that I worked on before working on Afro-Brazilian religious spaces was in Bahrain, in the Arabian Peninsula. And Bahrain is a small island, post-colonial society, received independence in the early 1970s. And I went there to study landscape, but I realized every time I talked to people about landscape, they had very different understandings of the word than I did. So they associated landscape with green. So one thing that I did every day, I keep notes, very detailed notes. And I saw a pattern. Every time I brought up the word landscape, people associated with the color green. And I realized that people understood landscape in this very beige, dry, arid environment. They understood landscape as the contrast to the desert. And my interlocutors saw landscape through the lens of color. This led me to two further, and I'll conclude in a couple of minutes, but this led me to two further questions. The first is, what is the role of color in design? So based on a very local observation in Bahrain, I asked, why is it in landscape architecture we do not teach color theory, for example? It's a very rich topic, an incredible amount of literature on it, but yet in design schools, we shy away from this topic. Yet everything we design has a color. And secondly, I observed that most of my fieldwork in Bahrain was done at nighttime. And the reason for that is twofold. One is I'm Irish. I don't cope with the sun very well. But secondly, it's when landscape comes alive in Bahrain. So people actually don't use public spaces until the nighttime. And yet in design school, we are often prejudiced towards designing for the daytime. The nighttime has very particular design challenges. The lack of light makes colors different, our perceptions of space are different. And yet we persist in, at least in the United States, at my university, we persist in focusing mostly on the daytime. So from this very local observation, you can make further deductions that can then be translated into theory and practice in landscape architecture more generally. So I totally agree with the importance of local design and planning philosophy, and how that can be translated into a more global form of practice and can enrich practice as well. So thank you.
Well, many thanks, Garrett. I believe I will get the slides and we will upload the slides and get it across to everybody after this. I want to welcome here. I saw David Hughes join us from New York. We will get back to you, but for the time being, we want to bring here now Dr. Muyiwa Agumbiade. Later on, we'll call Professor David Hughes from City University of New York. I see him joining us right now. Later on, we'll call him. But we want to call Muyiwa Agumbiade. He's a senior lecturer here and he's an urban planner. We'll hear from his perspective. Dr. Agumbiade, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adejuma, for bringing me to this conversation. But you permit me that I'm not going to use all those big grammars and terminologies that we ended up getting more confused with the presentation. So there won't be any graph, cosmotolia, all those stuff. No problem about that. So I'm taking a different look, and the look I'm taking a broader view of the environment of the cities, and I'm saying I want to look at it now, bringing everything together, different philosophy of each of the buildings, each of the neighborhood, and all those small clusters. Then looking at it from bigger, broader perspective. So now I will say, looking at local design and the planning philosophy, I'll borrow from Dr. Adejuma's things now when he said rooted. So our planning ideas in Nigeria is rooted in philosophy of confused.com. So if that is my own inclusion, that's fine. What I mean by that is everything about planning seems to be confused. So if you go back to the ideas Dr. Adejuma was trying to pass across in terms of the cosmograph that he was using, all those these 4 quarters, this and that, I would say that we got confused in virtually every aspect of our life. In fact, let's even start from the profession of planning. You ask me, if I ask some of my colleagues, I don't even know how to call it, whether it's urban planning, whether it's town planning, whether it's regional planning. Even defining planning is a little difficult for us. And when you don't know in epistemology and ontology, if you don't know what you are dealing with, then it becomes difficult to actually deal with that thing. We don't actually know what is the profession planning. So the confusion starts from there. Now, our language has been convoluted, our culture has been disorganized, our value system has been warped, religion and culture is mixed, mangled together, we cannot actually separate it. So then lead us to loss of identity. So we come to the stage that we realize this confusion. Let me put it that way. Someone once told me that if you are flying across any city, anywhere, any country all over the world, take advantage of sitting by the window side of the aircraft and look through the window, look down. Whatever you see tells you, speak volume about the people or the value of the people that live downstairs, in that system. So when I heard that, the last time I was coming to Nigeria, the following time I was coming to Nigeria, flying through Agege, and I looked through, I saw confusion down. Everybody is confused. So then I began to ask myself, where is this coming from? I was born in Ilesha, I grew up in Ilesha. I can say authoritatively today that Yorubas are not actually confused. We are organized. If you go to Ilesha, you hardly find any building not having direct access to road, irrespective of how remote or how old that building is. So the question I'm asking myself, how are we able to do it then that we find it difficult to do now? Why is all this thing, why is it confused? We also had one more example. I'm just coming from one project. We're having a meeting. And what we're trying to do there is to define slum. And I told them, it came up with this funny idea of what a slum is, to the extent of describing overcrowding. People, if you have more than 2 people living in a room, it's overcrowding. I wonder whether that fits into our realities in Nigeria. To the extent of defining people who are homeless as people, if you are living with your brother or your uncle or your mom and you are more than 18 years old, you are homeless. That's the definition of the West. So is that a reality in Nigeria? Maybe not. So we need to come back to find the expression in our identity and be sure and be convinced with ourselves that we have values. I was impressed when Moses from Brazil was trying to speak Yoruba. Now, in our case now, you are a Yoruba girl or boy born in Lagos, you can't speak Yoruba. So there's someone in Brazil is attempting, struggling to understand your Yoruba, and yet you would have that rich culture, you are not embracing it. So I will just conclude by saying that we need to go back to the basics and appreciate our values, appreciate our culture, appreciate our language, appreciate our traditional religion, and then bring all these things together in a way that will help us to develop and plan our cities. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to appreciate that one. Same one, two, 3 words seem to be resonating by 4 people. Values. It was mentioned by Garrett. It was mentioned by Moses. It was mentioned by Dr. Ayo Yusuf. It was mentioned by Kazum. Values and values and values. Well, our last panelist officially cannot make it because he has to rush to the hospital this morning. Professor Malays is not there. It's not here. But before we allow people to put your thoughts across and questions with our panelists ready to answer, I can see Professor David Hughes, who is an architect himself. Professor Hughes, you have anything to say for 2, 3, 4 minutes? Anything to share with us?
Is you unmute himself or unmute him?
Okay, well, do you want to unmute Professor Hughes?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, so it's just a wonderful opportunity, as it was last year, to meet with you and to visit Unilag. And I believe in, person to person, face to face, but with the circumstances and with this Zoom opportunity, I really, I'd say, honored to make a statement or two, and I thank, of course, Madli Okamavwa for really kind of putting me in touch with this circle of very well regarded individuals in the design field. I didn't come with the intent of making a very distinct statement about anything that I do or any position that I have. I think some of that is somewhat understood in the world, particularly of design focused on African-centered design. So I did make a couple of points when I heard the good doctor from Ireland and Harvard and so forth make some statements. And so while I may not stay for the entire question and answer, I just wanted to say a couple of things in response to. He was the only one, along with the one that followed him, that I heard in full. I don't know whether I missed anybody. But, one of the things that I wanted to say to him is that if he's looking to participate, as I'm sure he has in some some situations with cultures that are not necessarily, I'd say, distinct or I would say linked to his own birthright. You know, you start off by, you know, saying, how do they do what they do? And why is what I do more formal or less formal than anybody else's? I mean, the first thing you do when you go into another culture is you allow them to establish formalism. So to suggest that's one of the things that I know I had to do early on in my writings and position, is to say you have to think like the culture and like the participants in those cultures think, and not bring the notion, because I was looking for some names that would, I think, immediately, you know, connect with him and anybody in the West. You know, there's this term Oriental Gardens. I think everybody in landscape architecture and any kind of design realm is going to understand what you are indeed trying to argue in a very distinct, broad cultural format when you say Oriental Garden, you know? And I remember, of course, the very Baroque gardens and the way they were established. I mean, everything is sort of organized on geometric forms and formats or plots. The other thing too is he was saying, well, how can I work in places? It kind of reminds me of the old biblical term that said, when the children of Israel asked to sing, they were saying, how can I sing in a strange land? It's like, how do you design in a strange land? You come to that land with a sense of, you know, I'd say humility. The first thing that you're going to find in your land is a type of landscape that's not going to be the same type in various other cultures. So you start with that. There's also distinct flora and fauna. When you talk about landscape architecture, you couldn't get a more diverse breadth of flora than you would get in Africa. I mean, you know, a lot of growth is considered indigenous to that. And then finally, I would say to him, you know, first of all, do your research if you want to go somewhere else. And research is itself the underpinning of formalism. And then next, you know, understand that you come there not unless you have some purchase or some ownership in those lands. You come there because a client invites you. And if a client invites you, they obviously and are inviting you and whatever background or talents or skills that you've illustrated. So that was sort of as I heard in his lecture, and just wanted to respond to it. But
Thank you
thanks.
very much. We really appreciate that. And it's nice hearing from you again. Now, we have some time for question and answer for any of these panelists. And now we just, we ask for some time for the question and answer right now. We want them to come, whatever you want to ask. Yeah, I know some people have said some questions down here that we put across for any of our panelists to, who wants to answer them. Then later on we will call Dr. Kumola to come here and sum everything up. Question and answer, please. Whatever you are here on the globe, let's take some question and answer from you. Just signify, we will. Question and answer before we call back our panelists to do some talking.
Are you talking to me particularly, or
well, generally now? I'm talking to the audience that we have here. Any of the audience, anybody here that was? Thank you. We have one from David Adio, who is an architect. He wants to question. Yeah, can you just go ahead, please?
Yes, sir. I want to ask a question concerning the use of rooftop garden as a communal space. when you look at cities and overpopulation, the idea of having that courtyard space for the community, our cultural interaction, I'm thinking of a way forward is the idea of having the rooftop garden as a communal space. What do you think about that? Is it a good idea? That's number one. Then number two, the idea of when you build when you have buildings, for planning, why don't we have some spaces that are empty spaces, that are green? Why must every plot of land be developed in a place like Lagos? Why don't we have a law that says after 10 plots, we have a plot? Those are the two questions.
Thank you for your questions. They're there. The laws are there. I must let you know this. The laws are very, very alive and well. I know that's one within many of the cities in Nigeria. Talking about, I think it's left for us to individually find out there where we go. But this city, Lagos, for Abuja, for many of the cities, the laws are there. The problem is not the law. The problem is how to apply the law. We're talking about the rooftop thing. It's wonderful, but I'll just allow people to answer now. My personal opinion is that, do we live on the roof? I think that's what is the measure of the vertical urbanism. I don't know. Is there anybody who is willing to answer there whether we are ready for vertical urbanism and how we should go about our verticality? That's what it's talking about.
Or just 3 floors, not high rise.
Anybody who wants to answer, please?
Well, I would say it depends on the. I would say it depends on the context. I think it's very much a local response. It depends on the building. It depends on where you're talking about, and it also depends on what time of the day that garden would be used. I mean, right now in New York City, there's a tend towards painting rooftops white. And so you paint the rooftop white as a way of reflecting the heat and keeping down the impact of the urban heat island effect and the impacts of rising temperatures. So I think there's all sorts of factors we can bring into the design of a rooftop garden, which is but in the end, it becomes a very local set of factors that determine whether you would do that and how you would go about it.
Very well, sir. Thank you. We take some more questions, please. If you just write your question now, we can hear that one, especially questions that are very related to what we're talking about, looking at the roots of planning and architecture in Nigeria. And that would be nice for us to look at right now. Any one or two people who want to put a question before we bring in our keynote speaker to wrap it up for us, because we must be out of here in the next 15 minutes, please. Any other question?
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Dejuma, for organizing this, and thank you, everybody. It's something that definitely we need to pursue at this time. But my question is this: just one thing, that probably we need to pursue this idea or ideology from the angle of, if we are thinking of going back to the past, bringing the past, considering how far we have gone, and as Dr. Agumi said, that probably we are confused now with a lot of things. Now, probably what we need to be pushing is that, what exactly do we stand to gain by going back to the past? What do we stand to gain? Probably if people know, okay, this is what we stand to gain, that might be a profitable idea to sell that people can relate with, because we have been disconnected from the past so much, even professionals. So what do we stand to gain? Probably that would be my question.
Very well, thank you, Dr. Lagide. You are calling from England, I guess. Well, you are talking about, the issue is not repeating what happened in 1750. The issue is looking at what good was it before that can be used for now. So that's the issue we are talking about. Is there anything good within the local setting that cannot be decision that we can now take and repackage and use to create an identity for us as a people? Now, is anybody that want to answer that question, please?
Yeah, I'd just like to Can I join in?
Yeah, sure.
Just to say that we have to also be careful with the idea that whatever is local is in the past, right? Because the idea of time is also imposed on this value of modernity and Europe and the US as being the future. And we other groups are always in the past. That's part of a political move, part of colonization.
Yeah.
So that, you know, when we're recovering certain values, it's not to say that we're necessarily going to the past, but we need to acknowledge that there are good things about the way we practice design in other places that is not related to the way that Europeans or Americans do. And, you know, the future is not in following what European and Americans do, but maybe when we're recovering our values, we are moving to the future and not necessarily to the past.
Very well indeed. Thank you, Moses. Then we will take one or two questions then. But again, we will call in Dr. Kwola now, who is an architect, and he wanted to make a contribution. We are waiting for him to come on board and see what he wants. Dr. Kwola, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful forum. And
can we have some little volume, please, from your end?
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Is it okay now, sir?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I said, first and foremost, I want to appreciate as many of our distinguished scholars who are in the house. I must confess that this is quite an interesting and thought-provoking session. As I sat there listening to everyone, I could feel my mind racing to a lot of issues that I believe are germane to some of our discussions here. Now, first and foremost, I like to start from the simple. And then from what I've seen a lot of our people say here, I say that I've had my understanding a little bit more enriched. Because first and foremost, I first of all ask myself, what is philosophy? How can I pass myself across if somebody wants to ask me about philosophy? And then my simple premise on which I take off is that I see philosophy as the intellectual understanding of what that underpins every human endeavor in every society, whether they be science or arts or any of those matters. So, which means that design and planning is essentially, as Professor Adejima said earlier, is essentially an intellectual profession. It's an intellectual calling. And so this is probably one of the reasons why we're gathered here. And if we say designing and planning, by my own understanding, the philosophy of it, of the people, are inspired by three things. First, culture. Second, the environment. And third, by the historical antecedent of such people. So, which means if we want to look at and examine the design and planning philosophy of the people, then we know that those things are inspired by culture and by the environment in which they live, and then by their history. I'm glad that a good number of our distinguished scholars here have spoken quite a lot about culture, the place of culture in the design philosophy. Now, my take on that is that when we're talking about local, how local is local, then it becomes important for us to look at what we are the definition of local. If in our own case, we are talking about local, is it the Nigerian context or the Southwest or even the Yoruba land or Lagos? Because when we're talking about culture, the culture of a people, it encapsulates the entire thing about them. So which means that if we're talking about design, design has to be in line with what the people that are called the locals, you know, what the meaning that they ascribe to that environment that they have built. So which means that if you're talking about local design and planning, we need to be able to understand that those things have challenges. For example, we have what is called the challenge of convergence of culture. If you take a city, for example, maybe Lagos, there's a convergence of culture that is ongoing. That is, you have so many people of different cultural backgrounds converging together. So how do you define the architecture or the design of that place that is bringing?
Okay, I don't want this one to see me.
That is right. You know what you are saying here. I think it's good. Maybe that I can see Professor Shunai, the professor in geography. Maybe you'll be able to shed some light on that word. Here we have a whole lot of cultures in Lagos. But before that, I want to make a little connection here. This is not about Tunji Adejimo place. It is the architecture plus urbanism research hub. I'm just anchoring the one for today. So, Professor Shunai, he's saying in a city like Lagos that we have many people coming from all over Nigeria, what do we do? So what do we do when we get down to the issue of localism? How do we do the blending? Professor Shunai, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adejimo. I'm sorry, I'm just joining webinar. We had been at a ceremony for the university early. Let me say on behalf of the postgraduate school of Postgraduate School, University of Lagos that I heard, we want to thank you very much, congratulate you for this very, very interesting get-together. That's the language I use for it. At least Corona has taught us to be more united, cheaper. Now, on the issue at hand, let me say in particular, sir, that personally, well, I'm not representing any interest on this. The word local looks derogatory to me. I may be wrong, but I think I believe in that word indigenous. I think that sounds more like it. Because anything that we call local means that it is an illiterate idea. It is a perspective that has nothing good coming out of it. So even if you are writing a paper, you put the word local there, people will say that probably this has not gone beyond the confine of your locality in that language. So, but what you say is indigenous idea, indigenous knowledge, indigenous design, indigenous culture, that looks like it. For the Lagos environment, I would say that I would rather prefer to listen more for now, probably before the end of the program, because we all know that Lagos is the port of soup. In this wise, we have people trooping in from different parts of the country, from different parts of the world, and each individual has its own indigenous idea of how things are done, including design. That's why if you go towards the shoreline areas of Ilaje, Bariga, even down to Butebeta, down to some part of Bejuleki, the way people design their houses, the way they design their environments, the way they even reason when it comes to culture. I've seen Professor Olaiwola there. I'm sure she'll be able to say a lot on this from the creative arts perspective. I've seen Dr. Ayo Yusuf of the Institute of Diaspora Studies. So these are the experts when it comes to culture. But I want to say in particular that the way I want to do my own things, based on the way I was born, based on the way I was brought up, based on the way that I've read, I've seen things being done, my experience of having gone beyond my local environment says a lot about the way I live. And there is just no way to say that a particular design, is better compared to another one. Even we can put in this indigenous knowledge to modify what is being used in the desert area to get something that is better or more suited, that meets the current needs of climate change, that meet the current needs of hazards, disasters, that even meets the current need of health challenges like coronavirus, malaria, and whatever you can think about. So that's what I can say for now as I continue listening. But let me thank our colleagues too that are particularly contributing from outside our, do I use locally, quote and unquote now, our indigenous environment. I think the little I've had since I joined the Zoom discussion has been very, very interesting, and I'm sure that I have a lot to learn more. Thank you very much, Dr. Adejumo. Sorry, Dr. Adejumo, you have not
unmute your mic.
Unmute your mic, Dr. Adejumo.
All right, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, but thank you, appreciate it. Yes. I'm just saying that somebody, a question came in just now, talking about how do we now bring in, bearing in mind a city like Lagos, any of the Nigerian big cities that are compactly built, talking about how do we get involved in regeneration? I saw Professor Benga Nubi is there, and he's been doing a lot of work on urban regeneration. Professor Nubi, please, can you just share some light on that one and give some little answer to the person who brought this question in, urban regeneration and looking at the philosophy out of it. Professor Nubi, please.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Like Dr. What's his name? Agubiade said now, confusion. Well, I don't see confusion. If we want to understand where we are now, if we want to really understand where we are now, we have to go back and read Professor Mabuguje's book on Professor Mabuguje's book on urbanization in Africa, urbanization in Nigeria. You see, the confusion that we think is there today, probably evident Lagos, in Ibadan. When you get to Ijebu, you don't see this confusion. When you get to Ijebu, you don't see this confusion. When you get to Elisha, you don't see this confusion that we're talking about. Every African city has its own divine pattern. Like Dr. Agubiade said, we are not lawless people. We are not planning. We don't have planets. The first set of white guys that came to Africa, and they wrote about Ogbomoso, they wrote about Benin, they wrote about Lagos, they wrote about Oshogbo. They described, they said they made beautiful cities.
That's right.
Every Yoruba city has its form. Itaoba, Ojaoba, Ojudioba. These are open spaces that radiate around the king's palace. And they are maintained up to today in Ijebu-Ode. So this confusion is actually in Lagos because we fail to handle our urbanization process. We are the planning and the planners were lagging behind while the cities were growing until they lost control. So that's what we see now is that we see a nation that adopted dualism approach towards economic planning and development that favors only the cities, that many people now migrated from the rural area to the cities, put so much pressure on city infrastructure. People, instead of dying, like Modupe said long ago in the Ministry of Rural Poor, he said rural mystery, urban mystery is better than rural poor. So it's better
right.
to come to the city and live a miserable life than to die of hunger in the village. So people migrated to the cities and they put pressure. So this resulted into all these slums. Who are the people living in these slums? Slum is absence of basic urban infrastructure. Now, if we can just introduce those infrastructures that were lacking, we will begin to revive our cities.
Thank you very much.
We begin to bring orderliness into our cities. So let me conclude by saying that the planners have to have a rethink. And I kept on saying, whenever I have the opportunity like this, that planner came very late to intervene in the planning process and development process of the cities. And that's why the Yoruba called the town planners Atuluto. That is those who reorganize. The city has already been messed up. Whereas in the recess of it, town planners should be Atulu. But because they came when things were already messed up, they started calling them Atuluto. So any Yoruba person will tell you a town planner is Atuluto. Because there's no pre-planning before the evolution of this. So those are just, but we believe that we can, if we start now,
yeah,
we can get somewhere by cleaning up our slums. Slums are there. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Our time is about up, but somebody came with a question here that I don't want to overlook. It's talking about values, and again, I will want to. I know that Dr. Gary Duarte was talking about values. I know that Moses Fumale was talking about value. Between the two of them, the guy was saying, we're talking about values and values and values. How do we now redefine our values, bearing in mind the change in the sociology, social life of our people? That will be the last question. All right, the last answer. The other question now, Will, whether you want to talk? So,
sorry, yes, I will talk about the value thing. I want to pose a question to everyone here, which I saw somewhere. Somebody was asking, can you name the biggest structure ever built by a human being, and where was that built? I heard that it want to be a billionaire or whatever. So people were mentioning America, Australia, Ghana, Europe and all that. Nobody out of those panels mentioned Africa. The guy said they were all wrong. So he then said it actually was Nigeria. So I then began to look at myself. The biggest structure built in Nigeria, that was it. Benin Kingdom, several years, thousands of years ago, they built the biggest city wall, spanning 8,000 kilometers or something. But now we lost our value. We lost they made us to internalize that our things are substandard. Then we then start to embrace foreign ideas and foreign values, and we then lost our values.
As we close here, Dr. Garrett, you share your experience from Dublin, from a village in Ireland, and your work in Bahrain. Is there anything you can talk about values as we are trying to bring them to a conclusion? Dr. Garrett Duarte, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tunji. And also, I have to actually leave in a couple of minutes, but it's a fascinating discussion, and I think the idea of values is something that is constantly changing. I mean, our values are something that are fluid and dynamic, and I think there's a danger when we think about values that we look to the past, and I think we always have to look to the future and be aware and be open to values changing and to values being refined and adapting. I think that's the important thing. But values are valuable, are invaluable. But yeah, I think.
Can I join very quickly?
Thank you for having me.
Just to say that I think we must ask ourselves, what do we expect from life, right? That's a value. And if people only expect money, I mean, is that the future we want? Or do we want a good life? And what does it mean to have a good life? Is it really to live in a crowded space, working 12 hours a day? So I think in terms of values, we must ask, what do we want from life and from the future?
Very well indeed. It's been wonderful 1 hour, 20 minutes. I want to appreciate all our panelists. I want to start from Dr. Ayo Yusuf, our philosopher in the house is here. We want to appreciate our friends from Brazil.
Thank you very much.
We want to thank you, Dr. Gary Dwadi from Harvard. Of course, yes, we hijack Professor David Hughes too. We want to say thank you. We want to thank you for everybody here, people that are coming, our friends from Kenya. I can see them now. They don't want to ask questions, and I can see 2 or 3 of our friends from South Africa. On behalf of this center, this hub, Architecture and Urbanism Research Hub, I want to say thank you very much. And I promise you, before the close of the day, you will get everything via our YouTube station. Thank you very much. God bless you. Bye-bye.